name is Lisa, and I'm a 25-year-old software engineer living in Seattle, Washington. A few months ago, I moved into a shared apartment with a roommate named Claire. At first, everything seemed fine. Claire was friendly and we got along well. We even shared meals and talked about our lives. But soon, things took a turn for the worse. It started with small things. I'd be on the phone with my mom talking about my job, and the next day, Claire would casually mention it. "How's work going?" she'd ask, smiling like it was no big deal. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she overheard me through the walls. But then, it happened again and again. Conversations I thought were private suddenly became common knowledge. One night, I was talking to my sister about some personal struggles, and the following night, Claire brought it up in conversation. "Yeah, I know how you feel. It's tough to deal with work stress," she said, looking at me with an unsettling grin. My heart raced. How could she know that? I started to feel paranoid. I decided to search my room while Claire was out. I checked everywhere, under the bed, in the closet, and finally I looked inside the vent. That's when I found it, a tiny recording device. My stomach dropped. She had been recording my conversations without my consent. I felt violated and terrified, my mind racing with questions. When Claire returned home, I confronted her. "I found this in my room," I said, holding up the recording device. "Have you been spying on me?" Her expression shifted from surprise to calm denial. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her tone eerily casual. "That's not mine." I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't believe her, but I felt powerless. I didn't know what to do next. A few days later, I came home from work and found my belongings moved around. My clothes were on the floor and my laptop was in a different spot on my desk. Panic set in. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I could not shake the feeling that Claire was trying to intimidate me. I decided I had to get out. I reported Claire to our landlord, explaining everything: the recording device, the moved belongings, her strange behavior. My landlord promised to investigate, but I didn't want to stick around. I quickly found another place to stay and moved out as soon as I could. Once I was in my new apartment, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But the memory of Claire haunted me. Weeks later, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post about Claire. She had been arrested for stalking and harassment of her previous roommates. My heart raced as I read the details. She had a history of recording her roommates and sending them threatening messages. I felt sick to my stomach. I had narrowly escaped becoming a victim of someone so dangerous. That experience changed me. I learned to be careful about who I let into my life. Sometimes the person living next door can be a stranger in the most chilling way. I still think about Claire sometimes, wondering what she's up to now. The thought sends chills down my spine, reminding me that the scariest monsters can hide in plain sight, pretending to be friends while hiding dark secrets. My name is Tom, and I'm a 25-year-old software engineer living in a small apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota. A few months ago, I moved in with a roommate named Ryan. At first, he seemed like a chill guy. We bonded over video games and late-night snacks, and for the first few weeks, everything felt normal. But soon, things took a turn that I never saw coming. It all started when I noticed a strange collection of items in our living room. On a shelf, Ryan had things like old keys, random ID cards, and even locks of hair. I thought it was a joke at first, maybe his way of being quirky. One day, I finally asked him about it. "What's up with all this stuff?" I said, pointing at the shelf. "Oh, I just found them," Ryan replied casually, as if it were no big deal. "People leave things behind, you know. I think it's interesting." I laughed nervously, but deep down, I felt a shiver of unease. Why would anyone want to collect other people's discarded items like that? As time passed, the collection grew. I started noticing things that belonged to me, mixed in with his bizarre assortment. My old concert wristband, a pen I had lost, and even a small toy I had since childhood. Each time I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I confronted Ryan again, but he just shrugged it off. "You probably misplaced them, man. It happens." But I knew I hadn't misplaced them. One night, After a long day at work, I couldn't find my keys. I searched everywhere: my pockets, the kitchen, my room. Panic set in as I realized they were nowhere to be found. I decided to check under Ryan's pillow, thinking maybe I had dropped them there. When I lifted the pillow, my heart sank. There were my keys glimmering under the dim light, but alongside them were a pair of my socks, crumpled and stained. I felt a mixture of anger and fear. "Why are my keys and socks under your pillow?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Ryan looked at me, his expression eerily calm. "I thought I'd keep them safe. You seem to lose everything," he said, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. I felt trapped, and I knew I had to get out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing noises coming from Ryan's room, like he was moving things around. The thought of him going through my belongings made my skin crawl. I decided to leave. I packed a bag in the middle of the night, my heart racing as I drove to my friend's place. The next day, I found a new apartment and moved out as quickly as I could. I felt relief wash over me, but the memory of Ryan haunted me. I kept thinking about what I had left behind. Weeks later, I heard some shocking news from a friend. Ryan had been arrested for breaking into neighbors' homes and stealing personal belongings. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I had narrowly escaped living with someone who was clearly dangerous. The thought of what could have happened if I had stayed filled me with dread. Now I'm more cautious about who I let into my life. Sometimes the person you think is just a laid-back roommate can turn out to be hiding something dark and twisted. I'll never forget Ryan and his strange collection. It serves as a reminder that the scariest monsters can hide in plain sight, pretending to be normal while collecting pieces of others' lives. My name is Jake, and I'm a 23-year-old college student living in a small apartment in Denver, Colorado. I had just moved in with my new roommate, Ben, a month ago. At first, everything seemed fine. We shared laughs and even cooked dinner together a few times, but then I started noticing something strange that began to make me feel uneasy. Ben kept his bedroom door locked at all times, even when he was home. At first, I thought it was just a quirky habit. Everyone has their own level of comfort when it comes to privacy, right? But as the days went by, my curiosity grew. Whenever I'd ask him why he kept it locked, he would brush it off with a nonchalant, "I just like my privacy." There was something in his tone that made me think he wasn't being entirely honest. One afternoon, I was home alone while Ben was at work. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I suddenly heard a phone ringing from Ben's locked room. The ringtone was familiar, and my heart dropped when I realized it was the same tone that had played in the news reports about a missing girl. I had seen her face on posters around town, and the tone sent chills down my spine. I felt a wave of paranoia wash over me. Could it be Ben's phone? Was he somehow involved in her disappearance? I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't help but feel like something was off. A few days later, I was sitting in the living room when I noticed the door to Ben's room was slightly ajar. My heart raced as I contemplated whether to peek inside. I hesitated, but my curiosity got the better of me. I stood up and quietly approached the door, trying to be as stealthy as possible. Just as I leaned in to get a better look, the door swung open wider, revealing a glimpse of the room. What I saw made my stomach drop. The walls were lined with disturbing, explicit photos, images that were graphic and unsettling. I quickly stepped back, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt sick, realizing that I had stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to see. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, and the threat of what was happening behind that locked door felt all too real. I moved out the next day without a word. I packed my things in a hurry, trying to ignore the sense of dread that loomed over me. I didn't want to confront Ben, fearing what he might do if he knew I had seen anything. I just wanted to get as far away as possible. After I moved out, I found out through social media that Ben had a darker side. He had been reported for suspicious behavior in the neighborhood, and there were whispers about his possible connection to the missing girl. When I heard that, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had escaped just in time. Now I live in a different apartment, always remembering the unsettling experience with Ben. I learned to trust my instincts. Sometimes the person you think is just a laid-back roommate can be hiding something dark behind closed doors. It's a lesson I won't forget, and I'll always be cautious about who I let into my life. The memory of that locked door still sends chills down my spine, reminding me that curiosity can lead you to places you never wanted to go. My name is Julia, and I'm a 26-year-old graphic designer living in a small apartment in Atlanta, Georgia. A few months ago, I welcomed a new roommate, Megan, into my home. At first, I was excited. She seemed friendly and fun, but shortly after she moved in, things took a dark turn that I never expected. It started with a horrible smell that filled our apartment. At first, I thought it was just a broken fridge or something spoiled in the pantry, but it quickly became clear that the smell was worse than that. It was a foul, rotting odor that seemed to seep into the walls. I asked Megan about it, and she always had an excuse ready. "Oh, I must have forgotten some food in the fridge," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "I'll clean it out." But the smell persisted. Each day it grew stronger, and I felt sick to my stomach. It was coming from her room. I knocked on her door a few times, hoping she'd do something about it, but she brushed me off, claiming she was too busy to deal with it. I could feel my frustration boiling over. I started to wonder if she was hiding something. Days turned into weeks, and the stench only intensified. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. It seeped into my clothes and made me want to gag every time I walked by her room. I finally confronted her again, saying, "Megan, this smell is unbearable. You have to do something about it." She just laughed it off, saying, "Relax. It's probably just some old food. I'll take care of it." But deep down, I felt something was very wrong. My instincts were screaming at me that there was more to the story. Then, one evening, I came home from work to find her room empty. Megan had left without saying a word. I felt a mix of relief and curiosity. What had she left behind? I hesitated for a moment, but then decided to peek into her abandoned room. As I opened the door, the smell hit me like a brick wall, even worse than before. I gagged, but forced myself to step inside. The room was a mess, clothes strewn everywhere, and the air was thick with that horrible odor. I scanned the room, my heart racing, when something caught my eye under the bed. I crouched down and pulled out a large tarp, stained dark red. My stomach flipped. I quickly glanced around, half expecting Megan to jump out and scare me, but she was gone. I felt a wave of panic wash over me as I realized the truth. This wasn't just a messy room, it was something much darker. I also found a pile of dirty clothes, and as I looked closer, I saw what appeared to be blood on some of them. I was horrified, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. When the officers arrived, they examined the room and quickly took the tarp and clothes as evidence. They told me later that Megan was wanted for a violent assault and that she had been using our apartment as a hideout. I felt sick to my stomach. I moved out as soon as I could, terrified of what might have happened if I had stayed. Now every time I hear a door creak or a strange noise in my new place, I remember Megan and that awful smell. I learned that sometimes the people we trust can be hiding the darkest secrets. It's a lesson I'll never forget, and it haunts me to this day.